ABC News Election 72 continues, brought to you by Lincoln Mercury, where cars are built better to ride better at the sign of the cat. Now from election headquarters in New York, Harry Reasoner and Howard K. Smith.
Just after 10:30 in the East, 27% of the nation's precincts have reported, and one of the questions left seems to be, will Richard Nixon get the largest popular vote in history, greater than Lyndon Johnson did in 1964? He's holding, in 1964, he's holding 64% of the vote, 13 million, nearly 14 million votes, 7,600,000 for McGovern. The two other major minor party candidates, Congressman John Smits, with 1% of the vote, 229,000. Benjamin Spock, the pediatrician turned peace candidate, only 7,000 votes, not enough to make a percentage of. Electorally, Mr. Nixon now credited with 398, Mr. McGovern holding with 17, Massachusetts and the District of Columbia.
We have another projected winner in the presidential race in the state of Nevada with its 3 electoral votes. Nixon is projected as the winner of those 3 electoral votes in Nevada. Nixon wins Nevada. I think it's time we did a little recapitulation on the Senate races. There have been 17 Senate races now, 33 total to go tonight. And the 17 races, the Democrats have so far gained 1 more than the Republicans have. These are the Republicans who have succeeded tonight, most of them in re-election. The one at the bottom, Domenici of New Mexico, is a gain, a Republican gain from the Democrats. That seat in New Mexico was held by Clinton Anderson, a Democrat. It goes over to the Republican side now. That, I believe, is the only Republican gain. And here's a list of Democrats who've won races tonight. The Democrats have won 2 seats they didn't have before. That top one, Huddleston in Kentucky, was a Republican seat. Now it goes over to the Democrats. And the one in New Mexico, the one in South Dakota, George McGovern's home state, Aberest, a Democrat, has won a seat that belonged to Carl Munt, a Republican. So far tonight, the Democrats have done pretty well in these Senate races.
They're also doing very well in the race for governor. Of the 18 seats at stake tonight, so far it's a dead heat. We've projected the election of 5 Democrats and 4 Republicans. One of those Democrats, Thomas Salmon of Vermont, took his seat from a Republican, but one of those Republicans, Christopher Bond of Missouri, took his seat from not from a Democratic incumbent. But so far there's no net change in the situation. The Republican governors, Mark Bowen in Indiana, who defeated Matthew Welch, are there. Thompson in New Hampshire. Bond in Missouri, who becomes the youngest governor in the nation at 33. And Robert Ray in Iowa, re-elected there in a situation which has generally gone Republican. Among the Democratic governors re-elected chosen tonight are Briscoe in Texas, not too close a race. He was expected to win it in spite of the state going Republican. Dale Bumpers in Arkansas, winning re-election very easily against his opponent. Robert Docking in Kansas, elected to his 4th term in a state where he is not regarded as any less conservative than a Republican could be. Thomas Salmon in Vermont, one of the Democrats taking a Republican seat. And Richard Knipe in South Dakota. Richard Knipe winning handily in George McGovern's home state, where George McGovern is in trouble.
Harry, there have been some very interesting House results. I'd like to report some of them. We've neglected the House of Representatives. In New York, Elizabeth Holzman, who defeated 50-year House veteran Emanuel Seller in the Democratic primary, has been elected as a congressman or congresswoman from Brooklyn. Brooklyn Congressman John Rooney, a staunch conservative who defeated liberal Allard Lowenstein in a Democratic primary, has won another term. In New York also, liberal Congressman Ogden Reed, who switched from the Republican to the Democratic Party this past March, has been re-elected, though his congressional district is mostly Republican. In Texas, Democrat Barbara Jordan has been elected as the first black House member from a southern state in this century, and the second black woman who will go into the House of Representatives after Shirley Chisholm. In Massachusetts, Congresswoman Louise Day Hicks of Boston, the conservative Democrat, has won her race.
Down in Huntsville, Alabama, is a man who ran for vice president with Adlai Stevenson in 1952, and today fought off a challenge for the Senate seat that he's occupied ever since I can remember, Senator John Sparkman, who we project the winner in Alabama. Senator Sparkman, can you hear us down there?
Quite well, yes.
It's Do you feel that the party is going to survive the new Republican Solid South? Are you about to convert to be a Republican?
Not at all. Sure, I'm absolutely confident that the party will survive, not only here in Alabama, but throughout the nation. It's been down before, and so has the Republican Party. Each one has managed each time to come back.
Senator Sparkman, I know that the man you raced against tonight, Winton Blunt, is actually a friend of yours, yet you've had to say some hard things about one another. Are you still friends?
Well, I hope I'm a friend to everybody.
That is the perfect political answer, I think. Tell me, what
Well, you know, after winning, a fellow can afford to be friendly.
You're so right. What do you attribute your victory to? What factor put you across, do you think?
I ran on my record of performance.
It's a long, good record.
36 years. And I told the people that I was running on that record. They knew I had done good things for them and that I would continue to do the same kind of good things. They remembered those things I'd done. They believed my promise, and they supported me.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Sparkman. It's been a pleasure talking to you from New York, and congratulations. We have a projected race in the United States Senate, a result in the U.S. Senate, which is startling. One of the surprises of the night. In Iowa, Jack R. Miller, the incumbent Republican, who is second-ranking man on the Agriculture Committee, has lost to a relatively little-known Democrat, Dick Clark. Dick Clark, the Democrat, has taken a race a seat that was considered safe away from the Republicans in Iowa.
I wonder if that by any chance has something to do with the dissatisfaction of the farming community with the way things have gone in the last year or so. I wonder if that's where we're seeing it and not in the presidential totals. We now have another important projection in a gubernatorial race. ABC News, in the race in West Virginia for governor, has projected that Governor Arch Moore, the incumbent, has defeated John D. Rockefeller IV, the glamorous challenger, running with 34% of the precincts in, about a 4 percentage point lead. Governor Moore has defeated J. Rockefeller. We'll have more on Election 72 in just a moment.
Our coverage of Election 72 will continue after this message from Ford.
Last year, we split a diamond in a Mercury Marquis to prove how smoothly it rides. This year, we've polished Mercury to a new brilliance, completely restyled it for 73, even refined its famous ride. And now Mercury's the only medium-priced car with steel-belted radial tires standard. It not only rides like a gem, it looks like one. Mercury Marquis, built better, to ride better. At the sign of the cat.
It's not easy trying to outsell some pretty well-established European cars. Just over 2 years ago, Capri took on the challenge. With radial tires, 4 on the floor, rack and pinion steering, all standard. Maybe that's why after 2 years, Capri is outselling every European car in America except one. Capri, the first sexy European at a shamefully low price. Imported for Lincoln Mercury.
Many Democrats obviously have gone over into the Republican column to produce this landslide in the making tonight, but far the most famous, possibly the most effective of them, is John Connally of Texas. Mr. Connally, Governor Connally, or Secretary Connally, I don't know what to call him, is in Houston at our affiliate there. Mr. Connally, what do you think about the fruits of your labors tonight?
Well, Mr. Smith, I'd like to think that these were the fruits of my labors, but I'm afraid they're not. I rather think the election results tonight reflect great confidence in the American people and the actions of the president, particularly in the field of foreign relations, his efforts to bring peace to this world. And more than that, I think it reflects a confidence in his courage to meet the domestic problems that we have. I must say, I would assign even a further reason for this unprecedented sweep in the history of American politics, and that is simply that Senator McGovern, as I thought, really misjudged the American people, was outside the mainstream of his own party and the people generally in the country. Actually, the president could not have scored a sweeping victory of this kind with just Republican votes. He had to do it with independent and Democratic votes in unprecedented numbers that crossed over to vote for him. So I think it's a great victory, obviously. I think it's also one that needs to be studied.
Well, Governor Connolly, I was just going to ask that. This is Harry Reasoner.
Yes, sir.
And you've got a couple of problems now. You've got a Republican Party, which is maybe going to have the greatest election in history, but did it with a lot of crossovers and with a man who is now automatically a lame duck. You've got a Democratic Party in disarray. What happens to Democrats for Nixon in 1976?
Well, obviously, the Democrats for Nixon, as we know them today, will be disbanded. They're already disbanded as of today. But I think the message, Mr. Reasoner, is simply that the voters of this country, the average citizen, is saying to both parties, they're sending a message to both parties, that they're not going to be bound by the traditional ties of party discipline. They're going to vote for the man, and they're saying to both parties that you're going to have to give us men of responsibility, men of reason, men of logic, men who really represent the broad middle ground of American political thought, or we're not going to support them, regardless of what ticket they run on.
Governor,
I think this is one of the messages that
Governor,
they're saying loud and clear.
I'm interested in the future of John Connolly. What's going to happen to him in the next year or two?
Mr. Smith, I frankly don't know. I hope that I stay out of public life. I don't want an appointment, as you well know. I hope none, as far as I know, none's going to be offered to me, and I certainly wouldn't be presumptuous enough to assume that it is. But if one should be, I hope I can show the good judgment, really, to refuse it. Not that I don't want to serve my country, but I think I have. And I did what I did this year, not because I had any political plans, but because I felt very strongly and very deeply that President Nixon was the better man of the two, and I think America's won a great victory. And what happens to John Connolly, frankly, is of no consequence to the country.
Well, Governor Connolly, I'll be editorial and say I hope that's not so, because this has been a rather staid administration with only 2 splashes of color in it. One was Henry Kissinger and the other's you. We'd like to see you back.
Well, I'll be around, Mr. Smith. I hope I'm just not tied down by any official duties, and maybe I can create a little more excitement from the sidelines than I could as a team player.
Thank you very much, Governor Connolly. We'll have more on Election 72 right after this message.
A lot of girls go around wondering how other girls manage to look so put together. You know the kind. Her shirts always look right with her pants, which look terrific with her sweaters. Everything's great with everything else. Like the girl you're looking at, who put it all together at JCPenney, all based on one very special pair of pants. In style, they're a classic, but they're made of the latest thing, woven texturized polyester. They're like a wardrobe in themselves for only $13. There's no end to the great looks we'd be happy to help you put together. For only $13, you could even start all over with these extraordinary pants. This time, how about something in a nice houndstooth? At JCPenney, we know what you're looking for. Tomorrow morning, our 1,700 JCPenney stores and our catalog will be waiting to help you find what you're looking for.
Well, continuing the projections of results as they come in from states creeping west in the state of Montana in the presidential race, ABC News now projects that Richard Nixon will take that state and its 4 electoral votes.
In the state of Utah, the same result. Our projected result is that Nixon will carry Utah and its 4 electoral votes. No surprise, he's done it before. He was expected to do it tonight.
At the same time, in the race for governor in Utah, the 2-term Democratic governor, Calvin Rampton, we project that he will win re-election to his 3rd 4-year term. Again, some ticket splitting in that area. There's an extremely interesting race going on in the state of Delaware, the race for governor in Delaware between the Republican incumbent, Russell Peterson, and the Democratic challenger, Sherman Tribbett. On the popular vote at the moment, it is practically a dead heat. It is so close it's almost impossible to tell them apart. It's too close to call. The problems there involve Governor Peterson's championing of a very strict law against pollution of Delaware's coast. It's stopped some business investment in Delaware, which bothers people. And in the meantime, Governor Peterson has had to preside while taxes have been raised twice. He's running against the minority leader of the legislature. That race could go on for quite a while.
Harry, by my calculation, Nixon now has 406 electoral votes. If this goes on, he'll have double the number he needed to get elected, almost double, subtracting Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. Most of the states we've called recently, Montana, Utah, and Nevada, were Nixon's for the taking. But Wisconsin, I must say, came as a surprise to me. Governor Patrick Lucey has fought a hard battle for McGovern. McGovern became front runner in the Wisconsin primary. And I thought that would be very close indeed.
Well, except for Massachusetts, one after another so far of the states that McGovern might have counted on, even if you took a realistic view of the polls, have slipped away. Michigan, where there was some sign that he might get somewhere. West Virginia, which I think finds very hard to vote Republican in a presidential contest. The ones that are left that can pull down Mr. Nixon's runaway list, I don't know whether they follow the same pattern or not, but there aren't that many. South Dakota, his home state, where his associates have been doing very well. Minnesota, where it's a very tight contest presidentially, with Mr. McGovern's strength coming mainly from the Twin Cities. California, which was relatively close in the polls. But
you know, in 1968, Nixon carried every western state in the continental United States except the state of Washington. If he does as well this time, this is going to be a huge total. He will sweep most of the rest.
And they will come up to beat Lyndon Johnson's record.
I'm sorry I didn't ask John Connolly about that, what his friend and my friend LBJ think about that.
I don't. I don't. It's eerie listening to John Connolly. If you listen to him and don't look at him, you could swear that it was Lyndon Johnson, a stronger Lyndon Johnson, say 10 years ago, talking at you.
Incidentally, in Texas, you know, Lyndon Johnson didn't campaign for anybody, but his daughter, Lucy Baines Johnson Nugent, did appear for McGovern with McGovern, as did Liz Carpenter, who was Mrs. Johnson's press secretary, as did several other people connected with Lyndon Johnson. Go ahead.
No, as we mentioned before, we've been following the ABC City this fall, Columbus, Ohio, as being typical. And tonight, Jim Kincaid, who's been there all fall, has assembled a group of people of varying political ideas. I think it's time we went back and got a report. So far, there doesn't seem to be any serious argument. Is that right, Jim? Nobody's hitting anyone.
Harry, at least so far, there haven't been any casualties here at the Royal Inn, but we're not giving up entirely. I think one of the most interesting stories that we've done during the past 3 months here in Columbus was that on the uncommitted, or I prefer the word undecided voter, and I have two of the ones who appeared on that news shot with me. One has gone for President Nixon. He's Steve von Jasinski, and I'd like to have Steve explain why.
Well, earlier, Jim, when you came and talked with me, I said I was uncommitted and that I would lean towards President Nixon, and it would actually depend on what happened with a ceasefire agreement in Vietnam. My feelings were that if a settlement was signed prior to the election, that I'd vote for Senator McGovern under the assumption that it was postponed only to be done at the election and try to have a wave of support from the president saying, well,
so
it was done.
When the ceasefire didn't come about, you figured that was a plus for President Nixon, and that it wasn't a political ploy.
Yeah, I felt that it was not, in the sense that it was done deliberately at this time. I felt that he was showing the people that it was something that he was working for, that if it had come earlier, then he would have done it earlier, but it wasn't going to be something that was just railroaded at the last minute.
Phyllis Ash, I think you went the other way.
Right. I was leaning toward McGovern, and I voted for Senator McGovern. The reason I did was I felt he was more committed and dedicated to our country, and I thought he would really try to help eradicate our domestic and our international problems, more so than President Nixon has done in the past 4 years.
Phyllis, what are your feelings seeing Columbus has gone 67% so far projected for President Nixon, And it appears that the state of Ohio goes that way. You have any feelings about that?
I'm disappointed. I knew Nixon would win, but I thought McGovern would have a closer, would be a closer margin than it was. I thought at the last minute, he would pull in a lot of votes because of the failure of the peace plan.
And that's the story from the ABC City in Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you, Jim. We'll have more on Election 72 in just a moment.
The solid 73 Ford Torino. Can it ride over this course of 2x4 smoothly enough to keep a tightrope walker balanced on top? High wire specialist Bill Couch is about to find out on a tightrope rig to Torino's body. He's counting on Torino's suspension to soak up the bumps and keep him safely on that wire. Bill signals, and they're off. Those wheels are taking quite a pounding. But Bill isn't, as Torino's remarkable suspension does its job. The 1973 Ford Torino, the solid midsize that gives you confidence on the road. Incredibly smooth riding, stable, strong, and quiet. Because it's a Ford. The new 1973 Ford Torino at your Ford dealers now. Ford Torino, the solid midsize.
30% of the precincts in the country have reported now, and for about an hour, President Nixon has been holding a steady 64% to George McGovern's 35%, slipping down from a peak of 67, but not slipping since then.
If the politicians like to color maps, here's the way the map would look tonight. The Nixon states are all colored there, yellow, orange if you have a color set, light if you don't. And the McGovern areas, I'm afraid, are very hard to see. Massachusetts way up in the northeast, and very tiny District of Columbia, which is 10 miles square, and some subtraction. The Senate races, I think, deserve to be recapitulated this time. There have been approximately 18 or 19 out of the 30, 12, 18. And so far, the Democrats have gained net 2. That's the national election story at 52 minutes after the hour.